Hi, everybody. Welcome to our virtual meeting. Today we have our special guest, music master, PR master, Suki Pardesi. I hope I said that right.
Well done, well done.
Thank you. And she will take over from here. Suki, take it over, and I'll be let me know when you're switching pages.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Really good to meet you guys, and excited that you've all joined to listen to how you can craft your PR story. And hopefully we'll try and answer some questions at the very end if you have any, and maybe make some notes along the way if there's something that springs to mind so that we don't interrupt. But I'm really excited. Andrea asked me to join and to try and give you all an overview of the industry experience that I have in the music business. And this is just really a snapshot because I do work at the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester on the pop degree course. So I'm teaching students who are from the ages of 18 to 22. They're on a 4-year course which encompasses all sorts of activities: songwriting, composition, production, performance, and basically everything you need to be a musician in this century. So it's a really fully fledged course that gives them all a really good understanding and builds a solid foundation about how to promote themselves as well. So that's part-time job. And then my other job is as a promotion consultant when I started my own business about 5 years ago. And I also do a similar thing where I help artists to understand how to promote themselves. So I'm a strategic consultant. If artists are looking to do shows in Europe, I can help put together plans with my local contacts, and I have teams around Europe, and they all work with me to create strategies for artists who are wanting to work in the European market as well. So that's just a brief outline. So Andrea can move on to the next slide for me. That will be really helpful. So this is just a little of my background. I put this little cartoon in because that's exactly what my life was like when I was working as an international manager at Sony Music. I had my suitcases packed at the front door every week, ready to fly off to a different country in Europe, because many of the artists that were coming in from America would be promoting their music or doing tours around Europe, and I would be the person responsible for all their publicity, working with the local teams. So I never knew where I was going to be from one week to the next. It was a bit like a troubleshooter, glorified nanny, but also a PR maestro. So it was quite a demanding job, but an absolutely incredible time. I had 4 years at Sony, and then I worked as a senior press officer at Phonogram Records, at Sky Television, and I've also worked in the film industry and have my own business and have touched on some management in the past. So that just gives you a little view of my previous life. Carry on from here. Next slide, Andrea. This is just a small collection of photographs I thought might be of amusement of the various artists I've worked with. Some of them obviously maybe artists that you don't know because they are a lot older, but there's a few there that you might recognize. So let's move on, Andrea, to the next slide. So this is where we're going to start our seminar officially. So crafting a PR story to get your message heard. By crafting your story and understanding your USP, which we're going to touch on in a minute, USP means your unique selling point. You will be in charge of your own career until a label or manager is interested in you. It will give you an opportunity to get more creative with the content you post. You'll be getting an understanding of how PR and promotion works. You'll be in a unique position to start creating a fan base if you don't have one, or if it's a limited fan base at present. You'll also be able to get yourself gigs, and hopefully you'll get support from media such as BBC Introducing and Spotify. So those are the advantages. The next slide brings us into what is a USP. Apologies that the text is a little small, but Andrea is going to send this out to you all hopefully after the session, so you can read it in a little bit more detail. So USP is something that makes you stand out from the crowd. And the reason why it's important is because the music industry is absolutely saturated with artists. So how do you get attention? And you may or may not know, but over 100,000 songs are uploaded onto DSPs every day. So there's a very, very fierce market that's competitive. And, you know, it can be quite demotivating to think about these numbers, because then you might say to yourself, well, why would anyone pay any attention to me? Well, you've come to the right session today, because this is where we're going to try and open the tin can and figure out how we can actually find ways to get yourselves noticed. So you have to be open and think outside of the box when it comes to this aspect. And you can do it in 3 phases. So phase 1 is the depth of what you're going to be actually talking about. So who are you? What are your beliefs? Why do you do the things the way you do? And what are you actually doing? So it's crucial to be yourself, authentic and consistent with the messages you send out on your own social media channels. Basically, you can't promote your vegetarianism and the next day post a picture with a juicy T-bone steak. So that's why authenticity is really important, and integrity is important as well. You may think to yourself, well, I don't have a story. You know, how do I go about getting one? That's something we're going to touch on shortly. So if we move on to the next slide, please. How do you do this? So it all boils down to, what kind of a person are you? What's your personality like? Because it's important, you need to formulate an artist identity. You may not have ever done that before, so here's an opportunity to start working out what your identity might be. This can be done through words, images, and styling. So in order to stand out in the industry, you need to be more than just a musician. You seriously do need to have a story as well. And the different types of stories we can look at is that I've highlighted in red. An angle, something that makes you different. It's something that someone can relate to, and you will capture your audience's attention. And it can be broken down into the following areas. So your lifestyle. What sort of person are you? Do you like to stay home? Are you a party animal? Do you like keep fit? The movies? Are you obsessive over certain foods? Do you love travel? So the next would be your point of view. Do you feel strongly about anything? For example, animal rights, mental health, well-being. Are these elements of your personality that you'd be happy to share with the world? If you are actually someone who thinks, well, I don't want to do any of those, but I would like to help other people or help other artists, then you are paying it forward by passing on your knowledge. So it could be that as you are a musician and perhaps can play an instrument, you could show people what goes into playing an instrument and how you practice and what all the mechanics are about working with that particular instrument. Because believe you me, there's an audience out there for almost everything and anything these days. The next one would be your successes. So anything in your childhood, your teenage years where you might have achieved success. Perhaps, you know, you won awards as a child at school, or somebody had nominated you for an award. Anything that you feel you like to talk about. We're not saying you have to brag, but it's all adding interest to your story. And then in your past, is there anything that has affected you dramatically? Do you think about childhood as a happy place? And would you be keen to share that with other people? So these are all the elements of what it takes to create your story. And some of you may think to yourself, well, actually, I do have some interesting things that have happened in my life. If not, then there may be other elements of these bullet points that you might be happy to talk about. So give some thought to that, and we can come back to it a bit later on in the slides. We'll move on to the next one. So apart from your story, you also need to have a visual identity. I think that's something that takes some time to create, because you're in a position, if you're early on in your career, that you can almost sort of start with a blank slate, and you might want to actually collaborate with a graphic designer to create a visual identity that's professional and visually appealing. But it should reflect your music and your personality. Now, elements like your band's logo or your own logo, for example, if you go by the name of Amy, think about something sort of graphically beautiful that you could do to create a logo for yourself. And then that would resonate through every aspect of your music and your performances. So immediately people would recognize you from your logo. They would know who you are. You can also integrate this into your artwork for your single, EP or album covers, and then into merchandise and your social media. So as an artist, sorry, there's a couple of typos there, you should try and create something that's yours and represents you rather than trying to imitate anyone else. So I've worked with students and artists before who have got hobbies and they're into anime, or they might be very keen on drawing cartoons or caricatures of themselves, or perhaps someone that you're into nature and you love being out in the open, in the woods or out by mountains or oceans, or you have a romantic sort of dreamy personality, or you like black and white images. So these are all aspects of creating a visual identity for your content, whether you're going to write a press release or a biography, or you're going to post content on social media. So hopefully this has started to give you a sort of indication of the things you should be doing before you put yourself out there officially into the world. Some people may have already started this journey, so it'd be interesting to know how many of you are on that road already. But we'll move on to the next slide and see if there are other ways of sort of deciding what your USP might be. Because obviously once you've figured it out, you've got to then do something with it and present it to the world through your social media channels. And the aim is to increase your reach. That means your online following, because without your story, you don't really have much content to post. Perhaps you could post a photograph of yourself, but that is going to get very boring after a while to anybody who's following you, because you'd have to keep coming up with new photography every few months to promote anything you're doing. If you do this correctly and put all of your efforts into it, you'll be able to increase your reach, and you'll also start to get listed higher on the social media channels. And the benefit is that the algorithms determine what's important and what is interesting content. So if you have created an interesting story around yourself, the likelihood that more social media channels will be interested, and more people will then hence recognize and see your music and your art. Because eventually the goal is for you to be mentioned by other platforms than your own. And that could be people who are either other artists or music bloggers, a radio station, or an NGO or a charity that likes the fact that you're promoting human rights, or whatever it might be, whatever charity you feel affiliated to. And in marketing, this step is called earned media. You've done something to earn their attention. So next slide, please, Andrea. Okay, so in phase 1 and 2, you've established a community of online followers by your story, and you've managed to get other platforms interested in you, and they start mentioning you in their posts. The benefits of all of this is that the more people you reach with this, the more people will see you popping up on their news feed or read about you. And the chances are that people in the music industry will also eventually catch up, and you'll start to get your first bookings and gigs. So you now have a story for PR. So I'm going to take a breather there and find out whether there's anyone who isn't quite clear on what is a USP. If you could put your hands up or your little chat hand up, and Andrea, you could tell me if anyone's still not sure. Consuela.
Hi, sorry, very quickly. So I understand in theory what it means, but what makes it so unique? There's so many people that are into travels or that you know, feel strong about animal rights, but why is it unique about me? You know, I still don't understand what's my uniqueness.
Well, every one of us are unique, Consuela. We just have to unravel and unwrap ourselves and find a way of selling that to people. Now, obviously, we know that there's lots of people who support animal rights or charities or, you know, have a specific connection with certain things. But there are also a lot of artists out there who don't do any of this. They don't even bother to find a USP. So they are at the bottom of the list, whereas those that have started to think about a USP are getting ahead of them because they've already thought about this and how can they generate some interest in what they do. And it's not an easy journey, I promise you. It's something that you have to sit and think very carefully about, because there are, you know, obviously there's millions and millions of people in the world and millions of people are on social media. But if you just try and be authentic and be yourself, then you will find a way of creating your story.
Thank you. But do I have to like promote that thing all the time? For example, I've just traveled to Italy by train. So for the past 3 days, I've put a lot of content about traveling, but I'm not going to be doing that now till for the next couple of months. Do I have to do the same thing all the time? Like,
well, it's not a case of doing too much of it. You can't do it all the time because people will get bored. But what you have to do is find a way of wrapping that around your own personality in the way that you write your posts, in the way that you take your photographs, in the way that you present your shows. You know, there's always something about you that you can create and make more interesting than just saying, I'm a musician.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully. I mean, as I say, there's no one direct answer to that because there are so many layers. Andrea, do you have anything you could say?
1 second. Lauren is Lauren, I'll be right to you. I just want to share what's been written on the group chat, which is you can link your interest to the themes in your songwriting, which will always actually interest your new fans. And also Zara said, I feel sometimes it can help to ask people what they find unique about you. There is things about myself that I find absolutely normal, but it turns out others don't. So
that's a good idea, a good way of looking at it too.
Right. And Lauren, if you want to ask your question, go for it.
Hi. I've been talking to a lot of people about this because I've had some advice say to do exactly this and to post about the things that make you unique. So for example, like a lot of my music is written about the fact that I'm autistic, and so I also post about being autistic. But I've also been told that a lot of the algorithms on social media, if you're posting about different things, even if it's only 2 or 3, like alongside your music, the algorithms don't know where to place you, and so it ends up not sending out your content, which I have been seeing happen. And so, like, to me, both advice makes sense, although I think obviously having like your audience know who you are as a person is a better approach. But if that means the algorithms are going to ignore you, I don't quite know how to kind of, because you can't really compromise on those 2 pieces of advice.
It's understanding, Lauren, how to navigate the social media platforms, But I think whatever you do, you have to start with your story first. And you have to find a way of expressing that within your, I mean, initially it starts with your songwriting and the kind of artist you are and what genre you are. But there's always going to be a number of people who will relate to whatever you've written. You know, that's undeniable. Whether they are also autistic or whether they have any other, you know, they feel inclined to raise awareness for autism, then you'll have a huge raft of people out there who'd be interested in hearing what you have to say. So that's something I think you should certainly consider as being part of your story. But sometimes we can overthink and overanalyze everything. Mm. So it's good to just focus on one aspect. So, for example, if you feel strongly about writing about autism, it doesn't always have to be posts about autism. But if the reason why you are who you are, people should be able to relate to that, and they will be interested in you or your music. And I use an example like Mr. Capaldi, the musician. I've forgotten his first name. Lewis Capaldi, yeah. He managed to engage a lot of people through his sense of humor, because he spends half of his time early on in his career in his mother's bathroom doing his posts and laughing and joking about the toilet paper or something strange or humorous. And so he attracted a lot of people to his posts because he's a comedic kind of character. And as a result of that, more and more people wanted to hear his music. So this is where two sort of worlds collide, and they actually helped him to generate a huge amount of, you know, Spotify streams and becoming the success that he is. So it was an amalgamation of two things. It wasn't just his music. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, thank you.
So there may be other ways of kind of unraveling this as we go along, but it's really interesting questions you're coming up back to me with. So I appreciate that. So we're talking about the benefits, weren't we? So for example, if you start working your story and you've managed to get some interest online and other platforms are starting to become aware of you, the more people you read will reach, the better. And obviously, we hope that that's going to generate some interest in people wanting to book you on their gigs because they can see your story is garnering traction. So you now have a story for PR, which is the slide we're going to move on to now. So PR, for any of you who don't know what it is basically stands for public relations. When you are engaging with the public, obviously you don't know who your public is sometimes. So what you're doing is you're engaging with media who will then be promoting you to the public. So music public relations, music PR for short, is just a form of promotion for solo artists and bands. And the purpose of it is to just attract media attention and get publicity for your music, whether that's through your press releases, any interviews you do, any album reviews you get, or any gigs that you've managed to put into your calendar. But how do you write a press release? You can do this yourself once you understand what your story is, or you can hire someone to assist you, but obviously that can cost money. So I would suggest early on that you do sit down and try and write something yourself. And we're not going to be able to, in this session, sit down and look at a press release, but I'm happy to sort of share something with Andrea afterwards if she wants to circulate it to anyone. And then we can look at the sort of various elements that were involved in the process of promotion. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. Andrea, can we move on to next slide, please?
Why is a biography important? That's the new one?
Yeah, that's it. The next one, please.
Another one. Okay.
Sorry, it was we went to what is PR. It's the slide after that.
Yeah. So what is biography important?
Okay. So back to your story. Everyone in the industry needs to know who you are, whether that's a promoter, a journalist, a manager, or a record label. And an artist's biography or bio is like a CV. It's a short piece of writing that includes information about your life and work. This can help you to gain exposure to a wider audience and allow viewers to feel more connected with you. So it's the next slide. We've moved back, Andrea, please. That's the one. Okay. So in this biography, you need to be able to tell people if you have any significant or interesting achievements. Have you overcome any barriers, etc.? I think there's a delay on these slides, Andrea. Could we go back again to the biography one?
Okay, I think there is a delay. I'm on the biography. I'm not moving.
Oh, it's not showing on the screen.
I think it should be. Is it showing now?
It says how to write a press release.
Hold on, I just changed it, so maybe there's a delay. Yeah, she can see a biography one too.
I see it now. Thank you.
Okay.
So the things that you can write about in your press release are on this slide. So significant, interesting achievement. Have you overcome any barriers or challenges in life? Do you have a connection to a celebrity or anything happened to you perhaps in your life where you either worked with someone famous or they helped you? Do you have a passion or interest for anything quirky? Are you into vintage fashion and shoes or recycling? Are you good at drawing or art, making clothing? If you're obsessed about eating pork pies, I mean, you might laugh, but some of my students are a bit crazy and they often like to write about the food that they eat. And if you support any groups. So all of these can be woven into your social media. It just depends how strongly you feel about certain aspects of your hobbies or your interests. So just going forwards, it would be useful if you wanted to check other people's biographies, and if you're on Spotify, you can go and look at some of these artists that I particularly like. And if there be any that you feel are in the same genre of music as you could go to theirs and see how they've written their biographies, which is always very helpful. So we'll move on to press release. So what's the point of a press release? So as much as your story is important, what are you going to do with that story? Because then it needs to go into a press release so that you can share it with everyone. You can share it with media, or you can use snapshots of it to integrate into your social media posts when you're releasing any music. So make sure your opening paragraph always includes the 5 W's. That is who, what, where, when, and why. So basically, who are you? What's the press release about? Is it an event? If so, where is it happening? When? And what's the reason for it? So you've got to find a newsworthy angle. And then you've got to create a headline that grabs their attention. Summarize your story in the subtitle, if that's possible, when you're emailing people, and also introduce the essential information. So based around a link to your music, your artwork, your socials, good quality photos, or insert one into the actual press release. And at the very end, you will talk about perhaps what you're doing next, because media always like to have a story that continues rather than, oh, I'm doing a gig on Saturday and that's the end of it. It's much more effective to say to them, and in addition to the gig, I'll also be releasing an album in 3 months' time. So always try and end your press release with what's next. So we'll go to the next slide and we can then focus on what will you do next. So the whole point of this exercise of crafting your story is so that you get more exposure, that you get more interest from people, that you get more fans or You get more followers on your socials. And obviously you want to be able to play bigger and bigger venues. And the work obviously doesn't end here. We've talked about phases earlier on, but this is just the beginning of your work, because it's important that these are all ongoing processes. Just because you did a big gig last month doesn't mean you can stop being active. You need to keep thinking, what am I going to do in the next 2 or 3 months? So you may be releasing music, or you may decide to take a break. It depends on whatever you have scheduled. And how to do this is to keep up the work and provide your audience with relevant and interesting content, whether it's about a new album or music, or a catchy selfie, or an article that you found particularly intriguing. Again, that could be woven around your own interests. Once you've set a release date for a single or an album or an EP, then your press release becomes very important, because then you should be sending it out to music reviewers and bloggers at least 3 weeks prior to release. You might ask yourself, where do I find all these bloggers and reviewers? Well, they all exist on Instagram now. So basically you have to go on to Instagram, type in your genre of music, and see if you can find reviewers and bloggers that specifically write about your genre of music. And then you will send them an email with all of your information attached, including your press release. That's the whole purpose of the press release, is so that you grab their attention. Within that press release will be your story. So make sure that you're not sending emails randomly to bloggers if they're not in your genre of music. It's sometimes they can forward on your email to another person in their department or in their group. So you don't want to waste their time or yours. And the best advice I can give you is that you should create a database of all of these bloggers and reviewers that you have contacted, so that when you get feedback from them, you have an ongoing commentary of what they've said, whether they liked your music, whether you got no response at all, or whether they're suggesting you resend it in 3 weeks' time, which sometimes happens. And that will be your Bible. Basically, you'll be completing that on a regular basis, because every time you release music, you can then find new bloggers and reviewers as well. And as you know, online is where everybody is living these days when it comes to trying to get coverage. You've got to constantly be looking at on social media, you know, if there's an artist that you admire or is within your genre, check their posts and see who has actually written about them or provided them with a quote, or has endorsed or given them a rave review, and then follow those people and start putting them on your database and getting in touch with them, sending them your music. On the one hand, it's difficult, but on the other hand, it's a lot easier than it used to be, because you don't have to hire a PR person to do all of that. So the next slide, I think, is bringing us up to sort of the end of the session, and I'm happy to talk about more as we pop out of this. But with the steps that I've gone through, you do have the tools to shape your future and achieve your dream. And I'm happy now to get Andrea to maybe talk to some of you to see if there's any other questions, because I'm sure there are. And as I said, it's not an easy journey to craft a story, but perhaps some of you could share your interests or your stories, and that might help everybody else in the group. If you've
Yeah,
already...
so we have Zara who has a question. Go ahead, Zara.
Hello. First of all, thank you so much for this presentation. I think one of my questions is your experience with trial and error, because I know that very often we try, to make these things happen, but then maybe we stick with the wrong thing just because we think, oh, but my brand is this and that. And I feel like sometimes that prevents us from tapping into our real brand.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering what your experience is with that, with your students and clients.
When you say trial and error, could you be a bit more specific then?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I mean, I feel like, for example, a label, when they brand someone, they have all these resources and they have all these specialists, right? So they take a long time and create a lot of things in the background, and then once they do PR, everything is on point.
Absolutely.
But I feel like as independent musicians, because we don't have the team, we already start to become visible before having everything figured out.
Yes.
So I guess finding the brand is more a journey in that case. Would you agree?
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. It is a journey, and no one is suggesting to you that you are a fully fledged package straight away. It takes time, and I've often say to my students, don't rush into anything. Give yourself the time to create all of your assets, and these will include your artwork, your imaging, your branding, your identity, your authenticity, your press release, your bio. Obviously, to begin with, you've got to have your music completed. That's the most fundamental aspect of this whole industry we're in, is that the music has to be ready, and then you start creating all of your assets to help you promote it. So take your time, don't rush, because for some of us, it takes a long time to even come up with our story. But sometimes it's good to talk to other people and ask them their opinions about, what do they think would make them be interested in someone like you? What are those tick boxes? And often, if you've got a friendship group, you all like similar things. And that was my point about social media, that if you do it right, you will find yourself groups of people who think like you and will be very interested in supporting you on your musical career.
Okay. I have another question from Consuelo. I am a multi-genre non-performing songwriter. Someone has advised me to create different profiles for different styles, holiday music, etc. Would this help create stronger, more specific crowd followers? Crowd/followers.
Oh, interesting question. I would say that it appears to me that you have a sort of portfolio career, Consuelo, where you do different projects, perhaps, or you have different genres, as you've said. So it could be that if independently, say, for example, you were going to be a songwriter, but you also are a DJ, or you're also a session musician, then in that case, you would have separate social media accounts, because when people come to that account, they're coming specifically for that reason. If you're looking at where you are just an artist that works in different genres, I think it's important that you think very carefully about what is the most important thing for you, because it can get complicated, because there's no promoter that's going to be available to promote an artist that has performs in different genres. They want to be able to say, okay, this artist is R&B or this artist is pop. So it can get a bit complicated. Have you had advice from people to tell you something specific?
Thank you so much. So basically, my goal is to have a publisher in New York who's taken a bunch of my songs, not all the catalog. My goal is to eventually work with established artists and place as many songs as I can on Sing. I release as well sometimes, when things just don't get placed, I just end up releasing them. I follow a community called the DIT with Daryl Hurst. Don't know if you know him, from Canada. He weekly he gives us some advice on things, and he was saying it's worth creating different profiles for different things that you do, because then the algorithm, like the other lady was saying before, will be able to put you in a category.
If you have the energy to do that, then it won't.
Exactly.
It doesn't do any harm, Consuela, but you know, sometimes that can be very difficult to manage, can't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's hard as it is keeping the one profile across different platforms.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think I could.
I could make a proposal to you that maybe it'd be simpler to create a website.
Yeah, I have a web page.
So why not put it all on the website page, so that when you are wanting to present yourself as an artist, then you direct people to that site, and then they can see what genres or what aspects of your career you are promoting, because it's like a one-stop shop. You are a business.
I'm sorry, my phone's going. I didn't want it to distract you. Yes, I am a freelance, so I'm not really set. I don't really know. My career is all over the place. I find it very
Yes, it sounds like you're a freelance musician. So
Yeah.
I think I advise many of my clients and artists that it should really be about, if you have a portfolio career where you do different things, then a website is the most effective way of being your shop, so that people come to your site, they can see everything you do, and then they pick and choose what they want from you.
Thank you so much.
I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. James, I saw you have a question. Did you want to ask the question directly?
I put it in the chat because it's loud here.
Okay. So the question is, if your childhood was in a unhappy place, is it a good or bad strategy to share deep details of your past?
That's quite a hard question to answer, because I think some people feel it very difficult to share details of difficult times. So is it going to be of any benefit to you to do that, or is it going to create more anxiety and tension for you? Perhaps it's better to just focus on your music and find some other way of creating your story, because in the long run, eventually at some point, when you maybe perhaps hopefully when you're successful, you can talk about your childhood and your career if you wish to, because I think in the early days it can be off-putting for some people because they don't want to read about people's sad stories. So I think it's something I'd have to say you'd have to judge for yourself, James, whether you feel comfortable talking about it, depending obviously on the extent of what it is. You don't want it to take over from your music, but if you're writing lyrics, and within those lyrics it gives people an idea that you may have had a difficult childhood or something happened, then it may still resonate with a lot of people, and you may find a lot of support for that reason.
And there was a second question. How do you assess how the algorithm determine what's important and interesting content?
The algorithms like to see you working. Say, for example, Spotify obviously runs on algorithms. If you release music on your DSPs and you haven't done anything to really promote yourself via Spotify, for example, tagging Spotify in any of your posts, or making sure your artist page on Spotify is updated regularly, if there's no engagement with Spotify, the algorithms won't actually be aware that you're doing anything, so it won't activate those algorithms. Similarly, on Facebook or on Instagram, it's a similar scenario. Without you putting the work in, I think it's going to be very difficult to get the algorithms kick-started. You know, it's a real mystery, the world of algorithms, and I can't really explain it to you in detail, because you know, every platform has its own methods of you know, deciding who they want to support. But the more followers or likes you have on your platforms, the more chances are that the algorithms will pick up on it. So you do need to create that fan base and that interest in yourself as an artist in order to activate them.
There's Zara who has a question. Would content about current mental and physical health struggles also be too depressing in the beginning of your career?
It depends whether or not you are using lyrics to express yourself. Are they depressing lyrics, or, you know, it depends really on that. If you're writing lyrics that aren't very uplifting, you know, that can be difficult. But again, there are people out there who like that as well. So you know, it's a really difficult question, that one. You really have to think to yourself, what is it I'm expressing? Am I expressing things to try and help other people, or am I just doing it because you know, that's my sort of personality, and I'm hoping that I might attract a fan base? You really have to find a way of engaging that makes people interested. Why are you going to do posts about yourself if they are if they cause you anxiety, or they make you feel depressed? Then other people won't be that keen to read them. Perhaps you can spin them into something a little bit more uplifting, some sort of positive energy that you're attaching to it.
Thank you. I have a question. In terms of headlines, I'm just switching the conversation a little bit. In terms of headlines, what would you say would be the most interesting headlines for people to read about your music when you're a known artist and you're reaching out to a blog? How important is the headlines, and could you share some titles that you think people would open up the email more than others?
Yes, I mean, there's been so many over time that I've worked with artists on. So there are two aspects to this. One is when you're writing your biography, it's not as critical within the biography, but when you're writing your press release, it is. So say, for example, you have an event coming up which happens to fall on Valentine's Day, February the 14th, then you're already adding a theme to your press release. So if it's a love song and you decide to put it out on February the 14th, you can actually play around with that Valentine's theme and include that in your headline. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but do you have any example? Like, is there any? Because I always feel like people are not very interested if you're unknown or if you're not, been seen with an artist. So is there any, I don't know, anything that you could share that would make people read it? Because, okay, if I wrote a love song on Valentine's Day, my title would be what? It's Valentine, here's my love song. Something like that.
I generally say to people, within the lyrics of your song, you might have a few words that really stand out. Like it could be, I hate you. And I would propose that when you write an email, in the subject, you actually put, I hate you. And then you put in the name of your single and when it's being released and your artist name, because the chances of when that email lands on a blogger's inbox, that's the headline they will see straight away, which is I hate you. And there's more chances of them opening that than if you say, I love you. It's a very strange world because it's often very much down to the wording that you use in that strap line of your email header that will make them open your release. I mean, there's countless examples, but I can't really think of too many off the top of my head, but I'm happy to put that into the press release that I was going to send you, Andrea, and then you can share with everyone, because you know, it's personal to everyone. Whoever is writing a release about themselves, you have to find at least 2 words that will grab their attention and put them at the very beginning of your email subject.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, I think that's quite interesting to see which word. I love the fact that you say use something that's in your song. I think that's great as well.
Yeah, and a lot of people do say to me, I don't have anything interesting to say about my song. And then I say, ask them to send me your lyrics, and I'll read the lyrics and I'll find something and I'll say, go with this. And that often tends to work. People do then open their emails. So look at your lyrics and see if there's anything that stands out within those lyrics, and use those as your key words when you are putting your press release together.
Cool. Is there any other questions? Until then, I have another question for you. At the beginning, you talked about building your unique selling point, and you said once it comes into a certain point, then people will will want to talk to you versus you having to reach towards them. When would you say that happens?
I'm sorry, Andrea, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the presentation, you talked about your unique selling point, and
Yeah.
you talked about the fact that, you know, you kind of built your profile and then you do it to the point that people will reach out to you versus you having to reach out to them.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder, when is that? When do you think a profile, is it a certain amount of followers, certain amount of likes? When do you think people should reach out to you, and where should your focus be? Should your focus be on reaching out to those blogs, or should it be on building your brand?
Well, it's important you build your brand and have your identity and your visual image, everything ready before you start putting your press release together and your bio. So all of that has to be ready in the first instance. If you have an affiliation or a passion, say, for example, with any charity or group, then you can actually focus your content around that particular charity, or maybe, you know, whether it's mental health or it's LGBT, it could be anything you want to. The fact that you're even mentioning those aspects in your post, if you are tagging mental health groups or you're tagging any charities, then at some point they will see your posts, and if they're interested, they will reach out to you. But it's all about tagging, whether it's artists or whether it's people you want to collaborate with. I mean, obviously you wouldn't necessarily tag Taylor Swift, but you might tag somebody who's within your sort of peer network or your group network or your genre, and think, I'd love to work with that person. I'm going to talk about that person in my post because I'm such a big fan of theirs. And then you tag them, and then you just don't know, maybe one day that person will actually contact you and say, hey, I like your post. So then you start a dialogue with them.
Right. Okay.
So there are ways of doing that, but you have to do that within your posts when you're writing content on social media. So if you are releasing a single, it's really important that you have a social media strategy. And that means you have to think about each week leading up to your release, during release and post-release, and what content are you going to post? Exactly. Are you just going to post a piece of artwork of the single? Are you going to post a lyric video? Are you going to post an actual concept video? Do you have behind the scenes? Do you have an acoustic video? So it's layer upon layer of content, and all of that should be in your toolbox before you start to think about, you know, contacting people, because they're going to need to see that content on your socials before they decide if they want to reach out to you. So it is really reliant. You have to be a DIY artist. You've got to put everything together yourself. And perhaps along the way, you'll find friends or people to support you, whether they're photographers or videographers. And then you might do a favor for them and they'll do one for you. And in that way, you don't have to exchange money, but you exchange favors. And that works really well for a lot of our students because they're all working within the student community. And you know, by slowly doing that, by associating yourself through your passion or your interests with something, it will reach many people who have similar passions or interests, and that's when you start to build your online community.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Suki. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, they can get in touch with you through your email, right? That's
absolutely. I'm more than happy to do that. I think, James, were you asking a specific question? Was it USP or was it something else?
Yeah, I didn't catch everything you said about Spotify. It sounded like you used a technical algorithm. A technical acronym.
No, I'm not sure I did, James. I think my point is with Spotify, you have to be engaged with Spotify, so you have to tag them within your posts. So if you're releasing a single, you have to say, you know, to everybody that you're approaching online is, you know, look out for my single this weekend. It's available on all platforms, and then you actually have to tag at Spotify UK, at Amazon, at Apple Music UK. Because those are the types of actions that will start to trigger algorithms on those platforms. Not sure if that answered your question.
Okay. I think yeah, we'll say yes.
Okay.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, Suki, for joining and doing this. Everybody, thank you so much for joining. We have our coffee morning happening this Friday and a songwriting camp happening in September. So if you haven't seen it yet, please do check our website. If you want to get in touch with Suki, please do write her email down, which is right now still showing up, or get in touch with me and I'll send you to her directly. Thank you so much for joining. Have an amazing night. Suki, thank you so much for all the information and see you soon, guys.
Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure. Please, you know, go elevate each other, send each other your stories. Perhaps you can get some good feedback from each other.
Cool. That's a great thing. Thank you.
Bye then. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.